Good morning, watchers. Welcome to Brother Sal's Sunday gathering at the storehouse. Glad to be here once again and very happy that you're still listening. In fact, thank you for so many listening to our broadcast from last week. Seems that more and more people are starting to get interested in what we have to say, and we welcome you here to the show. Tony's with me again today, and he's got some very interesting things to say. Good morning, Tone.
Hi, good morning, Dad. I'm just doing what we're always doing this time of the week, catching up on what's going on in the world. And I feel like I've got something a little more original, perhaps, to add besides just commentary. I noticed we got a lot of views last week. And I'm really happy about that. I hope some, people I would like to see more questions so that we can get to the bottom of the story. And of course, we're coming from this prophetic angle that all these things are tending toward what eventually is called Armageddon in the Jewish scriptures and the Christian scriptures, and what is called the Malhama to the Muslims. They also have an Armageddon, this final battle, and they know it's going to involve the true Messiah of the Jews, Jesus, returning at that time. So, there's these pieces that we talk about in the Bible study in a way of extrapolating the truth from the scriptures, and then over here we're talking about trying to find out what's going on through the news and what's happening in the world. And what I'm realizing that I'm presenting to people that's hard for them to understand is what do you mean Russia's fighting America and they're both being funded by the same group? How do you prove that? How do you show that? And that's what I believe we can try and demonstrate by what we know of history, or what I've learned of the historical narrative, which nobody has to say every event that they report is true exactly the way they report it. But the fact is, we believe in Babylon. Why do we believe in any history? The Egyptian pyramids are there. How'd they get there? How did anything become what it is, except that it does have a backstory? We live in a physical world that leaves remnants. If you don't walk on the beach, it doesn't leave any footprints. And if you do, it does. And so whether that story is recorded or not and kept accurate or not, the facts of history remain facts. And many of them can be extrapolated because of the monuments that exist. The Roman Colosseum's still there. And so many people said that they saw things happen there that it's hard for me to imagine that, that's just made up. That didn't really happen. So we have a long history of history and a way of sort of verifying some things that are hard to deny, like buildings and empires and the Great Wall of China looks pretty hard to, and the bodies that went into making it, those are pretty hard to deny. And so this is history that we have, and I think alongside that, what's so important to grasp is money history. And I don't have some sort of academic understanding. I'm no monetary scholar. I'm no scholar of any kind. I've been studying the scriptures and in a certain way for 30 years or more. So I have a lot of knowledge in a way that touches on other streams of knowledge. And so I've come into contact with monetary policy and monetary systems and political and, all the things that make my knowledge fuller, trying to understand how the scripture and how the truth that's supposedly written in scripture, how's that play out in the world? And I'm starting to see it pretty clear, and I really hope to be able to share that. And so rather than just read the news right now, because which I will go over some of the headlines, I think it's really interesting how it's all seeming to fall into place. For me anyway, if you go back and listen to what I've been saying, I'm presenting it as America is not stumbling through this on accident, and Russia is not suddenly standing up with a military to scare the world on accident, and the world's not being told all this on accident. I mean, when you consider who's in charge of the news, we can back engineer this thing and provide some pieces of the puzzle that if you want to look at it like a jury trying to decide a case, the case I'm making is things aren't what they appear to be. And the thing that isn't what it appears to be is that this sudden Russian force, this Chinese superpower, because if you go listen to what I'm listening to on some of the, these alternative sites that have their interviews with economists and political analysts, everybody else who's got an opinion, human beings that appear to have some insight in their field of knowledge. And you look at what they're saying, and China appears to be just as big a fraudulent bubble as America, doesn't it? I mean, we present through the media, this is what I'd like people to see. In the media, we're presenting China as this, they're building military bases in the middle of the sea. They're becoming a threat to us militarily. They're cyber attacking us so that we're being told China is some sort of, up and coming threat. And now their yuan, I just saw something where it's the fourth largest, currency in circulation in the world. I mean, there's this, what I read in it, I don't see, as you know, if you follow anything I've said for any length of time at all, I don't read the headlines as giving me the facts. I read the headlines as giving me the story that they want me to know. There's facts in that story, of course, or they can't sell me the story. So you got to have a deeper context in which you are looking at their headlines and their story. What are they trying to tell us? So for me to sell me the idea that it's happening the way they say it's happening, why are so many seemingly, alternative and intelligent individual voices poking holes like they did in the Kennedy assassination? Why does it all look like 9/11? Why does it all look like a lie? Why does it all look like a controlled media? People that are able to tell you Building 7 just fell down 20 minutes before it actually fell down. Right? Somebody knows what's going on, don't they? Who's pulling the strings? That's the deeper question. And why? Why pull strings that bring you to World War III and Armageddon? And if the scriptures are right, we're coming from this. I'm on a show where people study the Bible to see if what the Bible says, or what does the Bible say about what's the eschatological viewpoint, I suppose is the more appropriate way to say it. What do we think the Bible says about the end times? And it's clear that both when I say the Bible, the Judeo-Christian scriptures and the Quran say the same thing. It comes to a great war, a war like never been seen before, a war that destroys most of humanity. It's funny how that jibes with some of the, what both these religions, all three of them, I suppose, including Judaism, would call the heathen religions. So even if you're from a Christian standpoint, let's say, or any of these monotheistic religious standpoints, these are like the demons that led people to follow idols and write their prophecies, right? That's the way a Christian that I grew up with would have to see it. Any of these Hopi Indians or Aboriginals or shamans in South America, I mean, those can't be God's people, can they? They're children of the devil. They're following all these devil spirits, right? Funny, they also see they don't see their people just suddenly overtaking everyone or eating everyone's flesh, so there's only that. I mean, I don't know, whatever kind of imagination you could have for the way they might prophesy it. Funny, they prophesy the same thing as the monotheistic faiths. A cataclysm in the end, in which everything is changed. Humanity is wiped out or nearly wiped out. So is this just a coincidence? Is it written in the stars that way? Why is that the story that's handed down through both the monotheistic faith and what they would call the heathen religious cults. So we're approaching it from the standpoint that, isn't it interesting? I am anyway, how, and I've been seeing it for years. Daniel, of course, we've been watching the prophecy of Daniel come to pass with the 10 kings in that region and the 3 that have to be uprooted and stuff that's, to listeners that have been with my father for, 18 years, is really old rot. And so you can, he made a book 10 years ago about it. You can really find out the whole deal for free at our website there. So avail yourself of that information. I don't want to have to go over it every week, but the fact that we're on this path out of Daniel seems apparent. But then if you even take that out of the picture, we're still on some sort of path toward destruction that everybody seems to agree with. And now for the last 20 years, 30 years that I've been looking at the world, and like I say, 30 years ago, I saw Russia get defeated completely. They tore the wall down. They got economically, culturally, they got slammed. I mean, in every way in my world, in the West, we just defeated them. We stomped our feet on top of the memory of them. Nobody wanted to be a communist in my country anymore. Ha, ha, ha. Did capitalism kick your butt? Don't you want to be a free American like us? And we went and spread that all through Eastern Europe, places like Hungary and such. And it's funny because I seem to feel now, I would have never understood this, but having a friend now in Hungary, that, communism wasn't any nicer than capitalism, okay? To the people who lived it, as the antithesis, it was harsher. So capitalism came as a reprieve, funny enough. The capitalism that we Americans look at and say, oh, it's so bad. And this is the deeper picture I'm hoping to get at today, is the way all of this is a duplicitous setup. It's all being done on purpose because there's no other way to get at this war. There's no other way human beings are going to destroy each other in the capacity that seems to be coming in the war that's coming, which doesn't take prophecy to confirm anymore. I mean, this is where I want to start bringing in everybody. 20 years ago, Russia was a defeated, broke, finished. And we were spreading our beautiful freedom and democracy to places like Hungary, who the people were feeling a benefit. An honest benefit of life. And so doesn't that make democracy look so wonderful now? So you'd think it would grow so strong that, when is Russia, when is communism, when is anti-that ever going to grow so strong again? It had its chance. Russia got to be so big. The Cuban Missile Crisis got to put the whole world on alert. Oh my God, are they going to push the button and kill everybody, right? And boy, think of the mileage they've gotten out of that for my whole life. And now, all of a sudden, we're back to the Cuban Missile Crisis when they were broke. Come on now. So this makes you wonder how'd that happen. I think this is the real study people should be doing if they want to understand what's going on in the news and what's going on in the Middle East and what's going on in the prophecies. You have to understand this history or you just... you're going to be lost in the propaganda, and it's a sea of it. It's 7 seas of it. It's a world ocean of propaganda on every shore, every flavor, every color, every temperature. That's all there is, really. That's all there is, except the truth you find in yourself. So my commentary comes from the truth I've been finding over a lifetime search. And then you have to find your own. In that sense, I'm with Herman Hesse. I can't give you what I know. I can only tell you what I've seen and how it's affecting me. And then you go ahead and see if how far down that rabbit hole you want to go. To whether I'm on a whole, I'm on a different planet from everybody else, right? Because everybody else has been following this sea of propaganda to the point where, to me, their shores are contaminated. Nobody's looked back to before it was like that. And it doesn't take that long, but of course, history's written by the victor, said Churchill. And it seems that way. I mean, it's kind of been confirmed since Rome that in our world, in our Western world, that you get to make it, you get to make the popes out to be saints if you're right in the history. You get the Vatican, to be a holy place. You get the banking system to be an upstanding part of society. Remember, when in the late 1800s, when they first tried to introduce this modern form of fractional reserve banking to the world and this Federal Reserve System, it was rejected almost everywhere and often violently. I mean, the money that funded people to say we should do this, we should do this, we should do this, people that saw through it were in the streets, and intelligent people were in their courts, in their streets, in their public view, saying, no, we shouldn't do this, we shouldn't do this. And they actually threw it out. They threw it out of America in the beginning. United States of America, I mean. Apologizing to my Central and South American friends who like to point out to us that we're America too. So, the good old USA, right? We've never respected any boundaries. And that comes from, inherited from the English Empire. So where do you start this history? And it seems to be that you have to start at this history of money and banking to get to the modern world, because who funds? This is what I keep wanting to ask people, and I'm seeing it again in these headlines in the news. Who is funding the Russians that suddenly are so big and powerful that the United States, who can shut Iran down or Iraq down, people who weren't broke? I mean, Iraq has been funded. Their military was built by us, right? Theoretically, Iraq should have been a lot stronger than Russia over the last 20 years. If you've been following the geopolitical scene, Russia's been a bad boy. Cold War, no more of that. Now you've been broke. You've got no money anymore to threaten the world with your communist takeover. All right? I mean, I'm sorry, but I grew up with it as a child. And then in the 80s, I watched it fall. We all celebrated. We all started acting like fat, rich, hypocritical, disgusting pigs as United States of American policy toward ourselves, toward everything. And, this whole modern world is the result of all that. But if you go back now to when they threw these people out, why? Well, because it's a system that takes over it enslaves you to a debt that doesn't exist. See, you sign up for the debt. You say, oh, okay, I'll take the money and pay you back a little more. Well, where are you going to get that little more on top of the money? Well, you go out and create something that's worth a little less than you sell it for. And that pyramid scheme starts growing from there, and it's all to pay back a debt that never exists in the first place. In the beginning, this fractional reserve required 10%. If you had 10% of the money on hand, okay, well, at least 10% allowed you to multiply your ability to lend by 10, provided everybody went along with this scheme. So think about that from the beginning. This ain't no small business. How do you ensure that if 8 of the 10 come back and say, forget it, we want our money? I hear there's a bad winter coming, and I want my cash. I want my gold back. I want my silver back. And you say, well, wait a minute, I can't give it all back to all of you at once. That they're not going to, string you up. So you must have had some sort of force behind the money to be able to offer the loan in the first place. It only makes sense, and it makes history as well. Because when you look at it, it's the Crusaders that raided and went and got the money from that the Muslims had stashed from all of Solomon's temple, right? All the gold and all that's essentially what we claim to be the essential or origins of the wealth of Europe and of the Catholic Church and such. And of course, it was more than just that, because that allowed them to, the wealth is in the land they own, the rulership. Wealth is always in rulership. I think maybe there's a reason that kingdom of heaven means rulership. It's not a place. It's not a house. It's not a mansion. It's not a big park with big gates on it. That's his tabernacle. But the kingdom of heaven is a word that means rulership, and it's the same word for evil. The kingdom of evil is the rulership of evil, wherever that's has its rule. But the kingdom of heaven's the rulership of heaven. So, when that whole system was changed in the relationship of human interaction, was when they started this fractional reserve banking, and I'm it's probably a really interesting study to read the people who spoke against it. I think there's a guy named McDonald who they killed, a congressman, senator, something like that. I believe McConnell or McDonald. I think it was McDonald. He seems to be the most outspoken one, and they killed him. And but there's record. It's just you're never going to learn. No journalist of our time is ever going to bring this stuff up. They're not going to go find that record, and I don't have time to go find that record. But I'm going to include it in my argument of this overall picture of how I'm seeing the world right now and what's going on in the Middle East, and how is it that I can claim or have this premise that that Russia and America are being pitted against each other by somebody who's pulling both their strings. Well, who would do that, and why would you do that? See, so, and that's why I want to include China as we did last week. I haven't got to talk so much about China because I'm still fairly ignorant, but I did go look a little bit about General Mao, and it reminded me of the whole integration of this all, when this all started happening. See, and that's why I'm trying to get just to before that, before 1900. When they were still being kicked out of everywhere, that they tried to work their scheme, and there were still intelligent human beings, rational people with guns on their hip, and horses that they rode to town with. And, when men were men, and as they say in Australia, sheep were nervous, it's in those days. And those men, they were like, wait a minute, your scheme's not, wait a minute, what do you mean pay you back interest for what? For taking my money and loaning it out 10 times? Shouldn't you be giving me something? Yes, I'm giving you interest. But wait a minute, you're charging way more interest than you're giving me. And wait a minute, how are you going to ensure when we all need our money, you're still going to, you've only got 1/10 of it. So many people saw it as a scheme right from the beginning. They said, nah. So what's so interesting to me now, I want to bring in some of what's going on in the world to me. China, they're buying up the gold. I'm going to relate what I've learned now. I'm watching my internet, and now I realize it's all propaganda. Whether it's my Yahoo Daily Stories, which are the official mouthpiece of, say, the Fox News, the blank left or blank right. Basically brain dead left, brain dead right. And then you got all the alternative sea propaganda that fills in between. And so what I've learned from that is that China has not only been cyber attacking us, and North Korea, two forces I didn't know wanted to take on the United States of America in my lifetime. I've never, that's kind of sudden. I thought we kicked Korea's butt in the 50s. When did we lose hold there? Because last thing that I've learned from all this research is that we have 1,400 bases, military bases around the world in 120 countries or something like that. Nobody else is even, Russia, China, and people like that, they don't even have any outside of their own countries or the, military bases. Our enemies weren't allowed to go do that, right? So once we went in and destroyed the Indo-Chinese in our war for, decades against them, starting in Korea and then moving to Vietnam and decimating those poor people even into this day. I'm wondering when people think we lost the upper hand in that region and suddenly North Korea thinks, yeah, let's attack the United States of America. Yeah, we got the money, we got the funding, we got the intelligence, let's attack them. What will they be able to do to us? I mean, does this make sense to anyone? Unless you can hide it all under this fog of propaganda where everybody's misleading you on some account. They're either showing you how strong Russia is, and they're showing you the facts. They sure are that strong. Where they get the gosh darn money? Why did we let them just print it and do it? Who let them just build up a military to send the world on to World War III again? These questions have to be answered, or you cannot understand anything, because, son of a gun, they shouldn't have gotten the money. There was no reason in my lifetime, and no, hey, wait a minute, I want to throw up my hand and say, excuse me, where was I? I'm kind of been involved most of my adult life. Where was I when we went from, Russia's being stomped under our feet as nothing? They're a laughing stock. They're nothing. They're worthless. You can go to Russia and buy anything for peanuts. That's how worthless their money is. That's the way it was when I was a teenager coming into my 20s. Oh, well, Russia, the thing I grew up with as being the great evil, is now the great, dust. It's dust under our feet. Now, you're telling me from there to here in my last 20 years, 25 years, that, I don't know. The whole intelligence industry's just been asleep at the wheel. Is that even possible to imagine, that someone didn't orchestrate this to be this way at this time? So now you get to the question of, maybe we're not there yet. Because, of course, then you got to get to, wow, why would anybody do that? But let's keep going down the road of what's going on that's so unexplainable. Russia, that suddenly has a military to rival. The one country who's so strong that no rivals have ever risen. Look at South America. The English Empire went there. You can go back to the Spanish invading them, but the Spanish are the ones that sort of left the descendants that started the modern societies. But when you look into our modern world, I shouldn't say the English, the Europeans went there. That's why Argentina's so European, to steal all the rubber, in the turn of the century, going back again, our 100 years. Go back and see your last 100 years of history if you want to know how you got here. The European money went over to steal, as like the expansion of the English Empire. Hey, what more can we get? We got it all, and we have all the resources. Like King David, like King Solomon, we can have whatever we want. What do we want? I don't know. What's out there? Gold? Let's go get it. Rubber? Oh, isn't that fantastic? Where is it? Brazil, South America? Let's go get it. Oh, they don't want to give it to us? Let's show them how we do business. Who are they? Just some Indians? And indigenous people, right? Do they believe in Jesus? No, let's kill them, right? Beautiful history. I don't know how you couldn't be proud of it as a Christian or a Catholic. It's just such a lovely history. And then you got your proclamation in Revelation that the Laodicean church is so, lukewarm is a word they chose, but the word is a word that means putrid. It's a specific word from the place and the time where there was water there that was so putrid, a temperature of it that was so distasteful and offensive that you couldn't swallow it. You had to throw it up. So that's what it means. That's what the church looks like to Jesus Christ when he returns. He can't swallow it. He has to throw it up. So I don't know why Christians are so proud of themselves. That's the real, unravel the last 100 years of history and what's been done in the name of Jesus Christ, and you'll know why the world can't stand Jesus Christ, and why the world's in the mess it's in, and why the world can get to Armageddon. It couldn't do it without the Christians. Couldn't do it without that right-wing, brain-dead, brainwashed Christian, believe in Jesus or go to hell, got to fight for Jesus when, of course, there's not a word of that in the Scripture if they bother to study it. And if you want proof of that, go to our Bible study, and I welcome all challengers. Show me the Scripture, people. Otherwise, go to some other channel. Stop hurting people. Pray for the answer. I don't know what to tell you. Or study is the best thing. So anyway, let's get back to this show, Dad. I'm just, I've been doing a lot of considering this last week of, same old in the world. Right? And so I keep wanting to tell people, go back and listen. Don't just look at the covers. Dad's doing some beautiful covers, with the exception of a couple of weeks ago, open the gates, we're all going to die. But that reflects a lot of this panic that the media is sending out. He was doing it in pantomiming the panic of the media. But, otherwise, the covers are so appetizing, people are hitting them, but are you listening? Are you getting the message? Because we've been saying it for a long time now. I've been calling out the Arab Spring for a while, and I noticed one of my Yahoo stories this week was how they gave this group of 4 people from Turkey the Nobel Prize for their work toward the Arab Spring. I thought, wow. I mean, okay, there it is for me. So now if you're on the conveyor belt going with the sea of propaganda, if you're floating around in the sea of propaganda in one of its currents, the Nobel Peace Prize, the Arab Spring, they tried so hard to set people free. Well, okay, go ahead. Try and keep working that line, the magic bullet theory. I was saying years ago, no, set up. This is not real. This is not organic. I can see all the signs in what I see today. Propaganda in the media selling me something that doesn't make any sense. Doesn't make any sense. Why? We put Mubarak in there. We've kept Mubarak in there all these years. We give Mubarak anything he needs to keep the stability, and I'll be darned if the stability, the people who are benefiting from the stability, all the middle class with their iPhones and their fancy cars, the ones that have servants that come from other parts of the Arab world or even Europe or Africa to work for them, yeah, these are the ones that are objecting and want freedom. Right, I don't buy it. And the poor people that might object, well, they know what that gets you under a regime that the United States of America backs. No, you get what we present to the world so that our capitalism looks so beautiful to you when they bring it to you that way. Okay? So now, are there any enemies? Why don't they just line people up and shoot who they want to shoot then? Aha, there's an intelligent question. First of all, they do that. Go look at your genocides. They do that. They killed the Orthodox Jews. They killed the Orthodox Christians. And now they need to kill the Orthodox Muslims. And so how do you do that? Okay? Well, there's a lot of them. Like the Orthodox Christians. How'd they kill the Orthodox Christians? In a country that was run by Christians, Orthodox Christians, right? They took advantage of the First World War and introduced the Bolshevik Revolution. They killed the Tsar and his whole family so that there was nobody. They uprooted the regime, just like we did in the Middle East now to create this vacuum. And they funded Marx and Lenin and Trotsky to create this cultural revolution. And that's where I broke off, I know, from China, because I want to talk about how General Mao, right? General friggin' Mao in China. What a brilliant philosopher. I mean, I've studied a little bit of philosophy. Not like I'm a professor of it or anything, but I'll tell you, I can keep up a little bit. And nobody seems to really give old General Mao much of a, he seems to be another mouthpiece just like Trotsky, just like Marx. And so General Mao went in there and upset a people that came from an extremely deep spiritual, cultural heritage, right? I mean, is this not history? Just like what? The Orthodox Christians in Russia. Just like what? The Orthodox Jews all over Europe and Russia, everywhere that, Poland, everywhere that they reached after their exodus from the Holy Land in those days. And they went, of course, into Africa and into Russia, and they were persecuted everywhere. As soon as that, let's not get into the long history of the Jews. Let's just pick it up when all of a sudden now in our last 100 years, this group of what looks to be money that goes back all the way to the Vatican, all the way to interests, let's say, associated with Vatican interests, mated with interests associated with what we have to call Zionist interests, because that's what they call themselves. We want that land back. That's our land. All right? Now, let me get to China and one last word and then jump back. So it's interesting that at the same time you have this slaughter of culturally, spiritually, deeply religious people that go back into ancient times, Hebrews, and then they become a sect of them become what we call Christians, and the Orthodox Christians go populate Turkey, and when they get kicked out of there by the Muslims, they go north into Russia, and that's where do your history. They killed. I've seen that they've killed 150 million over the 80 years that the whole genocide went on. I don't know if that's inflated or not. It seems that there's a lot of evidence that as many were killed there as in any other genocide. Because remember, nearly 20 million North American indigenous people were killed by the USA to settle America. I mean, 19 million is what I've seen seem to be reliable figures. Certainly, again, another huge genocide. So the genocide is on, it seems to be indigenous, deeply spiritual people that have some sort of right to the land you want to take. I mean, come on, is that history or is that not history? Start to search for these foundation stones in your story. Stop looking at these journalists talking their trash, because it's meaningless if you don't have some sort of foundation to base it on, and they're not going to give you the foundation. You better go learn it for yourself from history. And thank goodness right now, the way the internet still is, those that want to learn it can. I'm just so marginalized. I'm a nutball in the world of the sea of propaganda. My propaganda is it's invisible. And so I say good. That keeps it right under the radar so that a person can simply say, hey, have you heard what this guy said? Like passing on good music, right? I feel like I'm just, I'm good music to somebody's ears. And that's all. And the rest of it is just going to go on around you, and you're either into, you've been programmed to enjoy that beat. And so you're going to keep taking it. But I'm trying to offer up a different sound here, and one that's got a foundation that's real. And the foundation that's real seems to be that the money, now, okay, let me not get too far, stretch all the cords out. China then, through General Mao, seems to me to fit a pattern of representing what happened in Russia. Send in your cultural revolution, this new way of looking at it, backed by what? Military. Well, where do you get all that? Where'd the money come from now to back? Did he just walk into China? Oh, the people. Now, wait a minute. That's just like what happened in Egypt, right? Who backed that? Arab Spring, huh? Where's the money come from to make sure your side gets what they want? It usually, it's very rarely a popular thing. That's Iran. That's Libya. That's why these people have to go. That's coming, I'm giving a little hint toward the end of my talk, I think, today, Dad. But that's, where I'm trying to go with it. These other places that have been conquered already, what makes you think we're going to let them get the upper hand? And so that's your big picture. Russia can't possibly be the threat, and America can't be so stupid. The United States of America military-industrial complex that's been terrorizing the world for my whole lifetime cannot possibly be out of the loop on this one. And so that's got to be fake, like the planes that fly into the buildings. I had someone comment on that, and so I'll have to keep repeating that. Yes, people, airplanes can't penetrate steel buildings no matter how fast they're going. If they send them even faster, they'll just vaporize even more on the outside, right? They're not penetrating, and especially at unhindered momentum, just right into the building like the building was made of air. Impossible in our universe that we know. So either something else happened or the physics of our universe were suspended 5 times that day. So, come on, I don't want to open the can of worms of 9/11, but open your mind and realize that airplanes don't fly into steel buildings. Never, ever, 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 ever. Not once, not even a little bit, not even one, nothing you can do. So that's all there is to that. Cruise missiles, however, if you look up the potential of a cruise missile, kind of looks like an airplane. It has wings, It's not like the missile that hangs from the bottom of a plane. Cruise missile gets launched from a launching pad, like the way they launch an airplane from a ship. Whoom, off it goes. Looks like an airplane, funny enough. And that might be able to penetrate a steel building. But anyway, when you look at what we're being fed, you have to say, well, wait a minute, this doesn't seem right, you know? Saudi Arabia's last best chance may be an alliance with Israel. Headline that just pops out at me, right? Saudi are people that England put in and gave the Wahhabism and that whole sect the power, the religious power, and all of the, you know, they defeated the Ottoman side of the Muslim empire, the caliphate, to break it up 100 years ago and give it to this kingdom of Saud that they invented to be in charge. So now, that alliance goes all the way back to there, and now we're being told that their last chance, you know, and if you look at our shows back, I don't know, a few months ago when they had the bombings over there, I was pointing out that, you know, that this isn't going to go on unless they're, you know, going to make the big fight. They're going to escalate Saudi Arabia into this hot spot where we got to come and fight. But no, it was just to show, just to scare us for that week. Show they've spread, you know, because remember what I was pointing out in the media, how Saudi Arabia, like they've spread from north to south, right? And I said, well, yeah, because they blew up, you know, a couple of things and a couple of Shiite mosques in Saudi Arabia. But does that mean, I mean, what's this big threat? We've been in there for 100 years. Who are these guys that nobody can touch them? But now Russia, oh boy, the news all this week is how, you know, everybody's cheering for Russia. I mean, I love it. They've just got us cheering our way into this war. I don't know that this isn't the most respectable psyop that's ever been done. And you got the Christians singing for war. You got these jihadist Muslims singing for war, neither of which could possibly be adhering to their religion, neither of which represents a word in their own scripture. You got these Talmudic Jews who are Jews that aren't even Jews, but are people fraudulently claiming that land as their own. And again, go back your 100 years in history. What were your Arab historians saying? Hey, these European Jews are coming in claiming they're the seed of Abraham. That's not going to go well. Wait a minute. That's, you know, where's that going to lead? What did God promise the seed of Abraham? They're going to rule forever from Jerusalem. These guys are going to want to come in and take over Palestine, you know, and they're not Jews. So this isn't God. Allah's not doing this. See, and that's in history, but you're not taught that history. I'll tell you that I've seen it taught to me. I don't have I'm not an encyclopedia, so sorry, you'll have to go study it yourself. But I'm trying to open minds to a different vision of this whole thing. And since last week we were connecting the dots, so to speak, on how I'm seeing these players being pawns rather than authentic players as they're being represented to us, whether it's ISIS, who, you know, how come the whole alternative media seems to know that it's a botched CIA cover. We funded them. I mean, are we really? I mean, I'm again relating it to my life when we broke the Soviets, when we were the superpower that everyone wanted to be, and everyone loved America, and America was the great country that made everything better for everybody. I don't remember us botching everything like this. Have we gotten worse intelligence now? I mean, as we were building these 1,400 military bases and these underground caverns that hold these supercomputers and these drones and these weaponizing space, and in other words, while we were doing that, ISIS was able to rise and become something greater than us. Russia was able to somehow just go into the arms business and nobody could stop them or put sanctions on them or say, wait a minute, you're one of our enemies, like Japan. Has Japan been able to rearm in a way of having any kind of threat to anybody, right? That was part of the treaty, you know, the Second World War. You're done, buddy. You take on us. You you terrorize us with your Pearl Harbor attack. And you think we're ever going to let you people have, you can maintain your ideological difference. That's the freedom that we maintain in the world. But you're never going to have weapons again. So now that you break Russia, you don't think that's how you'd feel? Come on, when did they rebuild? So China, who funded that maniac, General Mao, that happens to look like the rest of the maniacs, Stalin and Lenin and the rest of them, the Jewish maniacs, I don't know their names, that have slaughtered over there these European Jews that have led this, Rothschilds and all the people he's funded over the years to lead these European Jews back to a land that isn't theirs, to slaughter the people that really have that land, because those people won't be bent. Now, this brings me back to the money, Dad. Why won't they be bent? See, all that's based on this human relationship with money. Because this money system that everybody rejected so heavily in the beginning of even the United States of America, the founding fathers, who, if you listen to me, I don't praise them as some godly, wonderful men that wanted freedom for everybody. They didn't want freedom for black people and slaves. They didn't want people for women. They didn't want freedom for, in the sense of having a vote on how the country should be. That was only for, people that owned land and were white. So you had to, who were they? Right? The people that had all these gigantic tracts of land that we now call Virginia. The whole state was once in the hands of a couple of people. So, and that's the same all over the British Empire. Go look at Australia, right? Go look at Hawaii. I was shocked when I lived there and found out that the largest cattle ranch in the whole world was on the state of Hawaii, an island. Had a cattle ranch bigger than Texas, and I've driven across Texas 900 miles. It takes 3 days to cross Texas, 2 days if you just, flat out driving. And so anyway, yeah, this is the perspective I'm trying to leave people, that you can really trace the money and the angles. So when you get to the why, you have to start integrating this vision of a people who are taking advantage of the fact that they want that land. And that's where I say the Vatican connection is, right? Because what's the Vatican got funding these Zionists? Well, you might claim to be Jews, but we claim to be Catholics. So why would we want to back you in this play to go get the Holy Land back? Oh, well, you can see there's a deal there. That's why the Pope's so integrally involved in the talks that go on about Jerusalem. And you're right, the Vatican owns so many of the holy sites and whatever. And I'm saying that they don't just own them on the books. I'm trying to get back to the history. The individuals connected to Vatican interest are where the money has come from, that goes all the way back, that because we know that old Rothschild was he was working for the working for the Vatican banks. He didn't just stumble upon his zillions. The money that he invested at the Battle of Waterloo so that he could take over the Bank of England was money that was, where'd they get that? Right? Where'd the original Rothschilds get his banking, his loan to get into the banking business? Well, he got it from the Vatican. That's history. So you do have your tie of interest there in history, and now you come down to this play where these Zionists, self-proclaimed, say, hey, God said he was giving us that land. We've turned into Jews. We're Jews. Who says we're not Jews? Who says we don't have Jewish blood? Just because we're in Europe, we got scattered. We got Jewish blood. I mean, the history I understand, and again, I'm no professor on this stuff, so I don't understand exactly the history, but from what Ethiopia is where most of the real tribe of Judah went. The people that actually lived on that land went away to Ethiopia, from what I understand of the history. The ones that went to Europe are, far fewer in numbers than the ones that went to Ethiopia. So, which is why you have these Arab historians saying, they went away black and now they're coming back white. So ethnically, the Jews that came back are different from the Jews that left, and that's always been pointed out. So imagine now that that's what's going on. These people that aren't really Jews, they just say, well, we've converted to Judaism, therefore that's our land. Well, the Catholics could have shot them down, couldn't they? Well, we're not hey, wait, that's not your land. It's more our land than it is your land. You're not really Jews. But no, suppose you make a deal with them. Well, now, wait a minute. That's a pretty good scheme there, buddy. Yeah, you're the Jews, and that's your land. I can get behind that, right? And that's the only way I can see that the Christians can be in bed with the Jews rather than the Muslims. Because the Muslims are also waiting for Jesus to return. The Muslims also claim Jesus is the true Messiah of the Jews. And so how does it wind up? This is another one of our interesting parts of the puzzle in which Christianity plays this role as this absurd, like the U.S. government, something it isn't. It claims to be something it isn't. How is it that this Christianity is in bed with the Zionism rather than in bed with the Muslims to fight the Zionism? It's the Zionists that want to get there and proclaim a different Messiah, because that's the whole idea of Zionism. Our Messiah can't come till we're on the land. But wait a minute. I think the Muslim take on it, Dad, is much clearer. The way I understand the Muslim aspect is that God kicked them off that land forever. They're never taking it back like he allowed them to take it back before, with guns and arms and go get it and I'll be behind you. He'll never be behind them like that again, is what the Quran says. God will bring them back there himself, as the Messiah, as the leader, see. So they don't get the land back till Jesus gives it back to them, is what the Quran seems to indicate. And that now starts to make sense of the scripture the way I see it. That makes a lot more sense. So this is Jews who say they are Jews but are not. That fits Revelation, doesn't it? So these people aren't really God bringing them back to the land. Now fit that into your equation and let that, pop your little gasket one more level. Like, what's his name? The Italian cook used to say, bam, kick it up a notch. Start adding the real ingredients, the foundation stones of history. And this house of cards fades away. I'm sorry, it just fades away. The bankers that have always had the money, funded through the Rothschild banking system, through the Vatican, who was behind them. Let's go get that land in the name of this prophecy. God's given it back to the Jews. Hey, you're Jews. Bingo. And the Arabs from the outset most of the Arabs were like, well, the Jews, they're our friends. Are you Jews? You're coming back? No problem. Go look at your history, people. The Arabs are that kind of people because Muslims are that kind. I should say the Muslims. The Muslims are that kind of people before our modern propaganda got involved, before the English Empire got involved, before this Balfour Declaration, before this money that I'm trying to trace it back to. And I want to tie it in again. I want to keep going back and forth between the sort of religious, geopolitical, and financial because, come on. Look at your three ruling states in the world. Vatican City, London City, Washington, D.C. What do they represent? Religion, money, politics, or weapons, essentially. So, these are your pillars of the modern world. And when you start drawing out the bedrock, dig down beneath the BS, throw away all the gravel on top, the sediment, let's say, that's accumulated, and get down to what is really there before the sediment accumulated. And it seems like, what you have is pretty clear. Who else funded these Jews to come back there? And then that can break you off into how World War II got going. Who funded Hitler to, who really built these labor camps and started this Holocaust of the Jewish, the Orthodox Jewish people, the people that really did have that blood in them from, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I don't know, I can't prove any of this, obviously, but this is my take on the facts. I would be willing to bet, everything that it would change my mind drastically to find out that those people weren't singled out for essentially being able to prove that they had real Jewish blood. That was what they were really after, not a cultural revolution like they were after to change the government. See, when they went into Russia, this culture Bolshevism, when they go into China, cultural, everybody for the people, that was the BS cover story to go in and slaughter what? The free spiritual people. What did China come from? A very deep spiritual background. Why'd they all want to suddenly back this materialist? Because what? Materialism was so philosophically popular. Why was it? Now go back to the history. Who were the publishers? Who were the people making all that so philosophically popular? Watch that they don't tie right back into that Zionistic train of money. Not that they're all Jews, that it's all this giant Jew conspiracy. No, where does the ultimate money that gets to say, yes, build those Russian planes? We'll loan the money for that. Yes, build this new China brick system. Let's get behind. Let's promote that. Where's the money come from? Well, let me talk about China now to finish this, to wrap it back up into a financial. I think I've made the religious point fairly clear. The geopolitical one is the one you got to read between the signs, but all the facts are there on the surface. Russia somehow is bombing over there. They're beating us. Come on. All this ridiculous stuff that they're presenting, just fit that into your bigger picture. Why do we need that? Well, because how else are you going to get to a war big enough to devastate that land enough that you can rebuild it in the same way you rebuilt Russia without all the Christians now? Now all the Orthodox Christians are dead. You get to go take that Palestine now and start your state, the new state of Israel, coincidentally, right after the Holocaust. Right after you found every Jew you can find in the world that's really a Jew with the bloodline left in Europe, and kill them all before you go claim that land for yourself. That seems to be the ugly history that really fits without having to create this stupid world in which somehow Russia just builds bigger military than us. Over my adult lifetime, when I watched my whole young lifetime, we crushed them into dust. And okay, so I won't repeat all that. Japan, Korea, right? Okay, so China. Let's look at all the money now that's threatening us on this financial thing. Where's that come from? They're buying gold. Where are they getting the money for that? Who's loaning China the money right now? We just saw how if you follow all this, what they're saying in the sea of propaganda, how their stock market, first it was presented to us on one hand, how China, they're this new warrior. They're the strong economic force that with Russia, these people that were crushed 20 years ago, and I'm still trying to find out who loaned them the money. Who do they owe when they become this great economic force in the world? Who does Russia and China have to pay back? Because where'd China get it? What do you find out on the other hand when you search the economic scene in China? All these empty cities, all this money that's fraudulent, just like the USA. It's all based on the same sort of house of cards, financial fraud, accounting fraud. It's all based on going back to the same model that they rejected before America even got started, right? This fractional reserve banking that has now just sort of been squared, cubed, and multiplied by every potential factor, that's scientifically possible. So that now what you have today is a monster of financial destruction. And that has to, of course, all be on purpose because it's controlled by somebody. But my point is, where's China's real wealth and power? They've got all these big empty cities. They got a stock market that's going up and down like ours that everybody's poking holes in, that they say they got to sell off all these bonds that are worth. In other words, they're juggling the same joke that we're juggling, an accounting fraud. Excuse me. They're juggling an accounting fraud. And that way, why? Well, because, again, why? In this sea of propaganda, every story can be told. They can be made out to be this great enemy. They have all this power. That look at their stock market, look at what they can do. Look at this Brazil. Brazil's another one that I remember, 15 years ago or something, that poor people were. I mean, I felt so sorry. I felt like that's one of the first places I wish I could go help those people. I mean, they got good surf in Brazil. Maybe I could move there and help those people, right? I mean, they were so bad off. Oh, all of a sudden it's Brazil and China and Russia. I mean, last I looked, Chinese workers made like $1 a day. We had to finally stop China from allowing them to work little children to death. I mean, this is the source of the great power that's going to take over. The one that descends from Vatican through the Rothschild banking system that can clearly be seen to have funded the move back to Palestine, World War I and the Bolshevik Revolution, World War II and Hitler and the slaughter of all the Orthodox Jews, right? This can all be tracked quite clear, but no China, with all their grand scheme of accounting fraud and an economy based on people that make $1 an hour. Yeah. So I'm afraid we're being told about all this gold they're buying. If you count those as the facts without trying to put those facts on a foundation, I say you're just building with cards. You're letting them hand you a card that you think is a solid, fact. It looks like a building brick to you because you're used to being handed a brick, a card, a brick that's really a card. And so you're stacking these cards the way it makes sense to stack them. But for my money, the foundation undermines it all. China doesn't have any integral strength. Where'd they get it? Right? The Cultural Revolution destroyed their spiritual, their any reality of becoming something. Again, look at the history. What happened to Africa? What happened to South and Central America? What happened to Indochina? How come why doesn't it happen to Europe? Why doesn't it happen to the great empires of Europe? Could it be that there really is a connection between all that money that's been around 1,000 years and the great empires of Europe and the conquering of the world and the Spanish going all the way over to steal the gold? I mean, when did these other conquered countries suddenly become so strong? And that's what I think has to now, if you really want to start being with us, I would, please subscribe and please help us out. If I had the backing of any of these other, so-called alternative journalists, I could at least try and put together I'd have the time to put together the bibliography for people so I could really show you the facts. But the truth is I have to live my life and I have to make a living. And I do this because it's just like, I don't know, I've fallen into it. I studied it my whole life. It's been an interest through the prophecy of what history is doing. And so, to wrap it back up into the prophecy for those that are, still looking for that, Dad, and I apologize if I didn't speak enough about that, but, in my mind, Syria being the third horn and that being uprooted, and wow, is that a trigger? Do we still have a few years to go where, just like we've seen it take 12 years to uproot the first two horns, perhaps it takes, there's a process here in which this third horn gets uprooted, in which all these isn't this the wars and rumors of wars? We always thought that was, we've been pointing to that for many years, but boy, Russia, Iran, because we know it doesn't come to Armageddon, which is 7 years after the whole covenant with many. Well, that covenant has not yet been made. We know that for sure. Rapture or no rapture, right? Christianity or no Christianity. If you're going to be following it on any sort of prophetic level, that, this Daniel prophecy is what's important, with the light of Revelation being the overall context that things seem, are destined to fall into. So the Daniel prophecy gives us this picture of the 7-year covenant, and at the end of that is when the God finally comes himself, and the Messiah does the defeating of the enemy. So the whole Armageddon can't really happen to the end of that 7 years, which hasn't even begun. So the war that's going to, that everybody's talking about on the screen right now, this is part of my insight of the foundation stones on the religious point. Wait a minute. We know that a lot of things have to happen before Armageddon, so that's not going to happen this year, next year, World War III. All that hype is, so I'm seeing back up, people, wars and rumors of wars is what seems to be going on right now. And I think that that's, what happened in Turkey now. I mean, I'm sorry, these are not organic. This is false flag. And here's why. Same foundation stones is what I build it on. This idea that, you know why people used to rob banks when I was a kid in America? Well, there's a simple saying. That's where the money is. Isn't it? And when I was a kid, the reason you'd rob a bank wasn't just because that's where the money is. You could get away with it. I mean, it was possible. You could plan it. They didn't have the firepower. They couldn't surround it 24 hours a day. They didn't have cameras then, right? So you could rob a bank. But you can't anymore. You just don't hear about people, holding up a bank and having them open the safe and running away with all the cash. I grew up with that. I mean, it happened every year. There was a couple of, hey, did you hear? They robbed a bank in Boston. I mean, somebody robbed a bank every year. There's even some famous ones, so why didn't that happen anymore? Because you cannot get away with it anymore. And I say, you can't even go try and get away with this stuff that they imagine, blowing up stuff everywhere, and no one ever gets caught. We never track any of the bad people down like they show in the movies. Our forensics teams that can find Osama bin Laden or tell you what hole somebody's hiding in around the world, they just can't track these people down on this earth where we're the ones with the 1,400 bases. We're the ones that operate with Mossad, our partner in arms in terror in the world, the Israeli special intelligence, the Jordanian intelligence, the Egyptian intelligence. Wait a minute. What has China got? How many weapons in space has China got? I mean, it's just absurd to me. When did their economy go through the boom that we had after World War II? Up until this very moment where the rich are, the stock market. When did China go through that? It's all fake. China's only boom was because they got enslaved. They moved all the factories over there, and so these people that used to just farm rice and do simple things and live a simple life got turned into an industrial power. And yes, that industrial power put out billions, and China got to keep a little bit for themselves. And that was a bit more than they were getting. So boom, boom, boom. Isn't China wonderful? Isn't capitalism wonderful? And do you believe now they're bigger than the guy who built them? It's just absurd. So follow the money in the sense of your foundation. Not today, China's buying gold. That's how they mislead you in this sea of propaganda, and why there can be a million stories today and the people behind the scenes are still laughing their asses off. Because I don't care whether you're following the China's rich or China's poor story, you're following the sea of propaganda. What is China really in the big picture but a puppet on a string? Whose string, Dad? Whose string and why? Those are the questions that will enlighten you, I think, to here's what's going on in the world. So anyway, thanks for having me on. I can't wait to see you next week. I guess next week will be our first week back doing the show together in the same room, and I'm really happy for that. So see you then.
Well, that was quite a great report, Tony. Thank you very much. And we thank you for listening. And we ask that you remember this ministry in your prayers. This keeps coming to you because of the contributions that you're making. The Lord has always taken care of this ministry for 35 years, and He takes care of it through you. And so we ask you just keep it up until we see you again next week. Have a great day in Christ.